Chicago University to the award ceremony for the 24th annual Holocaust Art and Writing Contest. I also want to welcome our friends in the 1939 Society and other survivors, as well as our national and international contest participants who are unable to be here in person, who are viewing this event on the stream. The theme of this year's contest is the strength of love and the will to survive. As participants in the contest, you have thoughtfully listened to a Holocaust survivor testimony. You have reflected on what you heard, and then shared your response in poetry, prose, and film. Your creativity is a gift of love to the survivors, just as their sharing of their witness, which often meant reliving much difficult memories, was a gift to you. Through the very special connection you have made, you now have a deeper knowledge and understanding of the Holocaust. Perhaps you also now have a different perspective in your own life and relationships. Listening to your survivor testimony may also strengthen your resolve to stand up and speak out against anti-Semitism, hate, and bigotry. The survivor witness has now become the call to action. We come together today as a community that stretches across time, space, and generations. Our contest participants represent schools across the globe, from Ireland to India to New York and Hawaii. We are all united in celebrating the power of memory as a much-needed reason for hope and purpose in our world today.
Today, we celebrate almost 25 years of partnership with the 1939 Society, the Holocaust Survivor Organization whose members continue to inspire and teach us. We congratulate the 241 schools and 290 educators in 32 states and 10 countries outside the United States who registered to participate in this year's contest, enabling us to reach more than 7,000 students. We're pleased to welcome all those students and educators around the world who are viewing this ceremony via live stream. As we gather today, we think of those who suffered and died during the Holocaust. And we think of those who are suffering now from war, as in Ukraine, or from natural disaster, as in Turkey and Syria. The students who participated in this year's contest give us hope at a time when we very much need it. Their entries affirm the power of memory and the strength of love, and are a powerful reminder to us to do whatever we can for those in need, both here at home and abroad. Each student in today's contest engaged with the testimony of a witness in the Holocaust. Sometimes the voice to which you listened had an accent, and you had to struggle to understand it. Sometimes it was hard to envision the older person you saw on your computer screen as the child or teenager they once were. But you persevered. And by doing so, their memory, their story, has now become a part of you and a part of your story.
The 1939 Society is an organization of Holocaust survivors, descendants, and friends. It is dedicated to Holocaust remembrance and education, so that the crimes of the Holocaust are learned and not repeated. We have been a proud co-sponsor of the Art and Writing Contest since the beginning. By entering this contest, you have not only learned history, you are living history. Later today, you will have the opportunity to meet and talk to a Holocaust survivor. Your generation will be the last to have this opportunity, although it is dwindling quickly as too many survivors have passed. Those survivors who are still with us are in their mid-90s. Child survivors are in their mid-80s. The miracle of the Holocaust survivors was not only surviving unspeakable horrors, but moving beyond them to make new lives for themselves, raising families and becoming productive members of society. They came to this country with no money, no education, no parents, and many with no siblings. They came from devastation that no human being had ever encountered. They came for what was to them a strange land. They did not know the language, they did not know the culture, yet they persevered and succeeded. They raised families and made sure their children received the best education possible. They succeeded in their businesses and careers. Some even went to college to receive their degrees. They succeeded in overcoming the unthinkable tragedies and became significant contributing members of society. They have become the most loyal of Americans. They have become an inspiration to everyone. The lesson for you is profound. No matter the type of background you come from, no matter how bad your family life might be, no matter how poor you might be, no matter how badly you've been treated, you too will prevail if you work hard, if you are a good person, if you are kind, and if you treat others with respect. I would like to introduce these remarkable people, and I would ask all survivors in the audience, as well as their children and grandchildren, to stand if able and be acknowledged. Living in difficult times, in your own lifetime, you have seen genocide and mass murder. Recently, you have seen increasing anti-Semitism in the United States, manifested in part by desecration of graves, synagogue shootings, and by threats to Jewish institutions. Hopefully, entering this contest and learning about the Holocaust has alerted you to the early trends of hatred and bigotry and has fortified you with tools that you can use. The most important message I can convey to you is don't be a bystander, be an activist. In your own world, speak out against bullying, against prejudice, and against hatred. Only each of you can make this a better world.
I'm honored to introduce our speaker, Dr. Glenn Kurtz. In 2009, while visiting his parents' home in Florida, Glenn made a serendipitous discovery that quite literally changed his life. Sorting through items that once belonged to his grandparents, he discovered a 16-millimeter home movie, actually a travel movie, taken by his grandfather on their trip to Europe in 1938, just a year before the beginning of World War II. Dr. Kurtz might have left the film where he found it and forgotten about it, or even worse, he might have thrown it away. But instead, the film sparked his curiosity and propelled him on a quest. While he immediately recognized the typical tourist sites his grandfather filmed, there was one place he didn't recognize. The 3 minutes of film from that location included dozens of faces whose identities were also unknown to him. In time, Glenn's quest took on an even greater meaning. It became a labor of love, and his years of persistent research eventually became a book. His book, in turn, inspired a gifted filmmaker in the Netherlands to create an award-winning documentary about the people in that film. Today, I think you too will be inspired, and maybe inspired to pursue your own quest. Please welcome Dr. Glenn Kurtz, who will speak on A Life Shaped by Love.
I'd like to take as my starting point the same inspiration that all of you used to create your artworks, your poems and essays and films, the strength of love and the will to survive. But rather than speaking of these words in relation to survivors of the Holocaust, as you have done, I want to speak about us here today. What does it mean for us, too, to live a life shaped by love? Perhaps in one sense, this is a simple question. We love our families, we love our friends, and already this love has shaped our lives in fundamental ways. What we eat, how we behave, what we believe. And even when we're angry at our family or hurt by our friends, even when we hate them and never want to speak to them again, after a while, we usually find some way to work it out. When these relationships are difficult, when they require work and forgiveness, we do this work and offer this forgiveness. Maybe not right away, but sooner or later. And we understand that this emotional give and take, this hard work, is itself an act of love. In another sense, however, what it means to live a life shaped by love may not be so obvious. Beyond the relationships we have with the people we care about personally, are the relationships we have with everyone else. People we don't know, people we have no particular reason to care about. Rather than personal, these are relationships with strangers, people we encounter only if we read about them or see videos of them. You are here today because you've created one such relationship. You've demonstrated that you care about the fate of a Holocaust survivor, about the suffering they endured, and the injustice and violence that caused it. Already, this has shaped your life. Perhaps being here today will have consequences for you, and perhaps the words of the survivor you studied will affect important decisions that you make today, tomorrow, next year, or in 20 years. I'm here for this same reason. As Dr. Harris said, in 2009, I discovered a home movie made by my grandfather during a return visit to his hometown, Nashelsk, Poland. He traveled in 1938, 1 year before the outbreak of World War II. And of the 3,000 Jews who lived in Nashelsk in 1938, fewer than 100 survived the war. My grandfather's film contains the only moving images of this community prior to its destruction. There are hundreds of people in my grandfather's home movie, most of them children. They crowd around the camera, make faces, and try to get him to focus on them. It's a perfectly ordinary scene. What makes it significant and heartbreaking is what we know that the people in the film do not. Within a few years, most of them would be murdered. The moment I saw this home movie, I felt a responsibility to the memory of these people. All of them were strangers to me. But the moment I saw them, I felt I owed it to them to try to discover who they were, to preserve their memory, and in some way to address a horrible crime that had been committed against them. Even if the only thing I could do was to learn their names, I felt I owed them this justice. I had no idea what this feeling would mean for me. I never imagined that now, 14 years later, I'd still be working to learn their names and to give them justice. And if you had asked me when I began, I would never have said that what I felt for them was love. But it was a peculiar kind of love, a commitment to respect and to honor them, a commitment which created a relationship. And even if they could never love me back, even if I could never even learn their names, still, I accepted the responsibility of caring for them. I gave them my time and my devotion, I gave them my conscience and my feelings, and when the work was difficult, I didn't give up. I gave myself to them, and what can I call that except love? Accepting this commitment, this love, is the force that changes your life. All of you have accepted a similar commitment in relation to the survivors you've studied. Their memory is now your responsibility. In some way, their stories belong to you. And when the survivors are gone, how you remember and honor them will be what their history is. Whether you feel it now or not, this relationship expresses a kind of love. So let's think about this love, this commitment, and the ways that it might shape us. The inspiration for this year's contest quotes the survivor and psychologist Viktor Frankl, who wrote, "The person who has a why to live can bear with almost any how." And it goes on to say, for those targeted in the Holocaust, even when they had no idea how they could survive, love, as both memory and hope, became the why. When we hear a statement like this, I think we tend to focus on the hope and the inspiration, the life-affirming, life-sustaining power of love. But it's important to remember that those who did not survive also loved and were loved. And when we speak of survivors sustained in their survival by love, we're not speaking of something that they possessed that others lacked. The victims did not lack love. They did not lack a why. But the machinery of genocide was overpowering. Love could not save them, and it did not save the survivors. No matter how much someone loved, very, very few of those targeted survived. When researching my grandfather's film, I had the privilege to meet 7 survivors from Dachau, including 2 who appear in the film as children. One of them, Maurice Chandler, is still living. He's 98 years old now, a father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. Mr. Chandler survived alone among his family. He lost his parents, his grandparents, his brothers, his aunts and uncles, cousins, and most of his friends. Over the many years we've been working together to try to preserve the memory of his community, he's imparted so much to me about his early life, his family, and his own survival. Most of the time, however, he remains emotionally very reserved. It's unusual for him to express feelings about what he experienced. But one day, he shared this brief recollection. I remember an episode in the Warsaw Ghetto when we really struggled from day to day, he began. We didn't know, all of us, how we were going to make it. We were selling off everything we had. And one of the foods that my mother used to get, they used to buy a raw wheat or something the farmers would bring in. I remember my mother used to cook this just in water. There was no butter or anything, just plain water with this hard-to-digest stuff. And one night I came in and she gave it to me. And I asked, "Where's yours?" And she said, "I ate mine earlier." Only much later did Mr. Chandler understand that his mother had eaten nothing, that she had given her children all there was and went hungry herself. Mr. Chandler told me this when he was 90 years old. And after a few moments of silence, he said, "You know, I'm a certain age already. And after all of these years, I never stopped missing my mother. Never. It never goes away." I don't know if there's anything inspiring in the grief Mr. Chandler confided that day. No why can answer his longing or soothe the pain of loss that he's carried with him his whole life. But this, too, is a life shaped by love. Even without war, without genocide, without the incomprehensible magnitude of the Holocaust, there is still the unanswerable pain of individual, personal loss, something we all experience. When we care about someone, we're afraid to lose them. And if we do lose them, it leaves a wound that may never heal. Love is hope, but love is also woundedness. Love is inspiration, but it is also inexpressible grief. And this emotional vulnerability is the very price of loving. But this is also where the personal and the historical intertwine. Simply by being alive, by being a member of a family and having friends, you too have embarked on a life shaped by love. But the easiest way to protect yourself from the pain of loss beyond your immediate circle is to not care about strangers, the wider world of people unknown to you, to say, they don't matter, they're not like me. It doesn't affect me when others are in pain, when they suffer discrimination or does not deny rights that I enjoy, when they are silenced, harassed, bullied, jailed, or deported and killed because someone else doesn't like who they are, what they believe, or how they love. And every day, in the face of news from Ukraine, from the southern border of the United States, or just on the streets of our hometowns, it's tempting to give in to the creep of apathy. But this, I think, is what the survivors have to teach us. In the face of unimaginable injustice, violence, betrayal, and loss, they still found within themselves the courage, the strength, the will to care for each other. In this same way, in our circumstances, we must find the courage to care about other people, to allow ourselves to be hurt by prejudice, ignorance, and violence, even against people we do not know and may never meet, to respect and fight for their human dignity, and to give them justice. Marian Tursky, a Polish survivor of Auschwitz, spoke at the 75th anniversary of the liberation of that camp. He remarked that in the aftermath of the Holocaust, there is an 11th commandment, in addition to the 10 commandments of the Judeo-Christian tradition. Thou shalt not be indifferent. In our personal lives, none of us is indifferent. We are fated to care about our families and friends. But by engaging in this contest, you have accepted the responsibility of caring for others too, for victims of injustice, for people you may never know, and people whose lives may be entirely foreign to you. You have chosen a relationship of caring, indeed of love, with the wider world. This will not make your life easier. On the contrary, sometimes it will make your life harder and more painful as you face inevitable disappointment and loss. Apathy and indifference might protect you, but every day the survivors and the victims challenge you to accept the responsibility of caring, to do the hard work of finding in yourself the strength to do justice, to make a difference, to do the hard work of a life shaped by love.
Lacey Middle School in Huntington Beach, Lakeside Middle School, Orchard Middle School, Tarwood v. Torah Community Day School in Irvine, second place work, Small Things with Great Love, about Gerda Weissman Conant, was written by Emma Acevedo from St. Francis of Assisi School. Emma and teacher Christian Raymond, please come to the podium. The first casework, An Apple for the Three of Us, about Bertha Haberfeld, was written by Alejandra Rojas from Good Shepherd Catholic School. Alejandra and teacher Caitlin Carlos, please join me at the podium. I'll now read An Apple for the Three of Us.
An apple for the three of us. Empty, heartbroken, lonely, nightmare. Bertha Haberfeld never imagined she'd be using those words to describe her youth. Never did she imagine the pain and loss that would surround her, and the strength and courage she would need to survive the unthinkable. Bertha was born on May 29, 1929, in Hungary. Her father owned a grocery store and a dressmaking shop. Bertha and her 5 siblings helped in the family business. Their home was happy, filled with love and laughter. They weren't rich, but it didn't matter because they were together. Before the war, Bertha was a young and capable woman who dreamed of starting a family. Those dreams were shattered in 1944 when her family faced the hatred of the Nazis and the nightmare of the ghetto. Bertha's memory of the ghetto is filled with pain. She recalled seeing the Nazis beating people on the street to death or leaving them with bruised and bloody. Eventually, Bertha and her family were taken to Auschwitz. As soon as they arrived, Bertha was separated from her parents. Tears ran down her face as she remembered turning to say goodbye to her mother and realizing she was no longer there. Bertha never saw her mother again. Even though her family was torn apart, Bertha was fortunate to have 2 of her sisters by her side. All around them was hunger, death, pain, and sickness. How does a human being survive such hardship and not give up? We survive with love. We survive together. Bertha told the story of a time when she and her sisters were working in the fields. They were cold, hungry, and tired. Suddenly, a French prisoner tossed them an apple when the guards weren't looking. The three sisters held the apple and couldn't believe what this man had given them. It may seem insignificant, but to them, this apple represented hope and love. Bertha recalled, "We held that apple, the three of us." This simple act of kindness reminded them that there was still love in the world. Holding the apple together represented the hope that they shared and gave to each other. I know that I could never truly comprehend the pain that Bertha lived through. I felt the sadness that Bertha still carries as she described her last moments with her mother, or the nightmares she still has about the war. I felt pain in my heart at the thought of my family being ripped apart. But their story also fills me with hope. The story of the apple reminds me of how the smallest acts of love and kindness can bring hope to those who need it the most. It also reminds me how the support from the people you love can lift you up when you think all hope is lost. Bertha and her sisters survived because they held each other. They shared with each other, and together they never lost hope. Thank you.
Rebecca us up to the front of our synagogue. He stared at us for a moment. Are you sure that you're 100% Jewish? Jewish. To them, it meant the problem that needed to be solved, the cargo that needed to be transported, the prisoners that needed to be kept in check, the inferior race that needed to be destroyed. I'm not sure why they asked my sister and me that question. Perhaps we didn't look like the Jews the Nazis had propagandized. Perhaps they found family records that pointed otherwise. It didn't matter. Yes, I'm sure. At the time, I didn't know what was in store for me or my family, though I did know that the Nazis had hurt my people, had driven some of my people like my brother, to hurt themselves. And I did know that I would never be part of the regime. I knew where I belonged. Jewish. To me, it meant the family that I loved, the religion that I loved, the God that I loved, the community that I loved. So when I answered the SS officer, it was not about how much I hated the Nazis and their tyranny and their inhumane ways. It was about how much I loved my people and how I knew that I would persevere through whatever the Nazis threw at me with my people by my side.
It's based on Renee Firestone's testimony. Emma Kozak and teacher Jessica Kim Saad from J. Sarah Catholic School in Rancho Santa Margarita. Emma responded to Dintia Kalinsky's testimony. Kelly Shang and teacher Maria Balvanera from Lone Hill Middle School in San Dimas. Kelly's work is based on Gerda Weissman Klein's testimony. Sophie Shinmai and teachers Marissa Sunny and Jeanette Bustamante from Beechwood School in Fullerton. Sophie responded to Yadja Stern's testimony. Gayatri Sivakoti and teacher Brandy Hyams from Lakeside Middle School in Irvine. Gayatri's work is based on Chella Miller's testimony. Please recognize these families. The second place artwork, Blinded by Confusion, about Dintia Kalinsky, was created by Emma Kozak from J. Sarah Catholic School. Emma and teacher Jessica Kim Saad, please join me at the podium. The first place artwork, Holding On to Hope, about Yadja Stern, was created by Sophie Shinmai from Beechwood School. Sophie and teachers Marissa Sony and Jeanette Bustamante, please join me at the podium. now read the statement that accompanies her artwork, Holding On to Hope.
In the midst of despair, Yaza's strength held on to hope. Alone in Auschwitz, she heard a rumor that her sister was in the hospital. When the rumor turned out to be true, the sisters shared an embrace, enveloped Yaza in a willingness to risk her life to remain with her indefinitely. That moment of raw emotion inspired me to paint their embrace and to reflect on my obligation to demonstrate Yaza's values, advocating for others. The sunflowers represent the comfort and hope Yaza had of hugging her beloved sister Sabina.
Vera Gissing described her last night with her mother and how they used the stars to communicate their love for one another. This emotional memory inspired me to create my film. I chose to use the bright colors and childlike aesthetic to depict young Vera and to show that every time she glanced up at the stars, they gave her the feeling of love and hope to thrive. With the immense amount of hate and prejudice in our society today, if we all found time to look up at the stars, our lives might be brightened by their loving glow.
When the moment finally came for us to leave, which was at the end of June, and my mother, she carried me on that last night at home to an open window, and I remember the night sky was full of stars, and she said, there may be times when we can't write to one another, but even while we can, let the stars of the night and the sun of the day be the messengers of our thoughts and our love, and in that way we'll always remain close. And I, as a little girl, every night prayed to God and talked to Mother and Father through the stars. And if a falling star suddenly appeared, I thought, that must be a special messenger from Mother, and it made all the difference. I never felt abandoned by them. I always felt close to them.
Love through tragedy.
Hello, my name is Anna Kunkel, and I'm a 10th grader at the 7th School in Cincinnati, Ohio. For this year's competition, I produced the film Renee Firestone, Love Through Tragedy, utilizing the survivor testimony of Renee Firestone. Renee Firestone's incredible story demonstrates a powerful experience of love during the Holocaust that became a source of strength for survival. Renee's dedication to her sister, Clara, was powerfully conveyed with, "You and I must stay together," presents the strength of love in the face of adversity. Despite the horrors Renee and her sister were enduring, Renee knew that she had to protect her sister, whom she loved dearly. This love motivated her to survive and continue to tell the story of the Holocaust in her sister, even long after Clara's tragic death in Auschwitz.
Were sort of slowly, systematically reduced to second-class citizens. When I jumped on that camel car and I looked around, I knew right away that we're doomed. I tried to run back to my sister. We arranged to meet at the wires, through the wires, every morning at a certain place so that we can wave to each other and tell each other that we are still alive and we're still okay.
How do we tell the story of a Holocaust survivor? How do we do justice to their resilience, strength, and perseverance? As the chaos of World War II descended upon Eastern Europe, Renee Firestone was thrown into an unimaginably horrific reality. shuttled in cattle cars with deplorable conditions, debased with the yellow star, and viciously separated from her parents, Renee was effectively stripped of her humanity. But in the appalling attempt to dehumanize Jews, Renee maintained a relationship central to her nature, her bond with her sister. This love, sustaining the atrocities of Auschwitz and the German occupation, contested the Nazi notion of Jewish inhumanity and incented her will for survival.
My sister to make sure that she puts her stuff next to mine so we don't get separated.
As the Nazis sought to suppress all facets of their being, their sisterhood prevailed. Her love for her sister prevailed.
I said to her, you hold on to me, no matter what happens, you and I must stay together.
When the Nazis separated them, emboldened by her abundant love for her sister, Clara, Renee fought back.
So I ran back to her and Mengele caught me.
Refusing to give up, they promised each other to meet by the wires every morning, but on Yom Kippur, 1944, Clara didn't show. When Renee came the second day, Clara again was nowhere to be found. The third day, the same result. Nevertheless, Renee persevered until her ultimate liberation in 1945. Although her life continued, she never forgot her sister's strength.
If there is such a thing as a soul, I hope that my mother and my sister can hear me now. It is them, not you, that help me till now.
Renee showed the power of love in the face of adversity. That love enabled Renee's enduring strength and her will to survive.
Nama will now read her poem, The Light in the Darkness.
The light in the darkness. So many things are taken for granted. The breath you just took, the song you just chanted. Even the will to live is a precious gift, which you must take, because in dreadful conditions, your will to live might slowly drift, and suddenly your whole world might crumble and break. When I heard the story of Bluma Goldberg, this made sense. I suddenly understood. When her life was trapped within a fence, she lost hope, like you and I would. Starvation, a small and thin girl begging for a piece of bread. Death, thousands of bodies who no one could defend. In a world where death, not life, became the new reality, in a world where people were killed viciously and with brutality, young Bluma wished for her own death to arrive. But instead, she found a source of strength that helped her to stay alive. My sister was there with me, and I think that she is the reason that I survived. The strength of their love continued to give them hope, like the fragile light of a match in the midst of darkness. And when Bluma was ill and death grew close, it was her sister who traded her own food for her and cared for her most. I closed my eyes and imagined them both. Hear the sounds of love and solidarity, a tired sigh, a whisper of hope. These rise above the roars of pure evil and hatred, reminding us all that those precious signs of solidarity are sacred. My great-great-grandmother Dova saved herself and 74 orphan Jewish children. She chose to love them, and this gave her the strength to stay alive. Just like her, Bluma and her sister restored the faith that even after its darkest moment, humanity could be revived. This instills in me the confidence that the strength of love can prevail as long as we embrace the lessons learned from Bluma, Dova, and many others too.